So it's that time of year again when the sun starts to come out during the day and the snow is starting to melt and shine. So it's that time of the year where a lot of the pictures start to turn out to be brighter and a lot more exposed in the light. So up here I have two different cameras. I have a film camera and a digital camera, which I'll explain the difference between them later. But for our digital camera, on the top of our camera we have the flash up here. We've got the scenery settings, which I'll explain later, the on and off switch, and the lighting dial, and then the button that you use to take the picture. On the front of the camera, you have your main controls. You've got menu, which will bring you to all the settings that will show up here on the screen. You've got the display button, which will black out your screen. You have your zoom in and zoom out button, your AV button, your record button, your view button, and your trash button, so where you can trash your pictures. And then you've got your switch buttons, which will switch through the pictures as you go through and also help you manage through your settings. With lighting, you have to be familiar with your atmosphere and your surrounding area. So in here, I would probably use the M button because it will automatically focus itself in for whatever light you're in. So with this, I have it on AV right now, but if I put it on M, it says 1 out of 15, which I can use this little sidey thing right here to change it. So since we're in kind of a dimly lit room, I would keep it lower, but not lower than 20, because then it will slow down your shutter speed. Also, when you're outside taking pictures, you got to make sure you are probably still on M, depending on if you are outside or if you're taking landscaping photos or portrait photos. They have a setting for portraits and for sports and outdoor and no flash recording and scenery and portrait. Those are like your main settings that you will most likely end up using. You probably won't end up using like the depth perception one or the P or the T or the AV ones. Those are most likely your more upgraded, more professional settings. If you're taking pictures outside, you need to make sure that you are familiar with what is casting shadows around you. So if the sun is out and you're taking pictures in a woodsy area, you have to make sure you place whatever you're taking pictures of in an area that's not going to have a giant shadow casted across it. Here, I would most likely be taking pictures per se by train tracks. And they've got that big water tower right there, which depending on the position of the sun and the time of day, will cast a giant shadow across the tracks. When taking pictures outside, the best time to take pictures is around 4 o'clock because the sun is up in the sky, but yet still setting at the same time, so it's casting a nice orange-yellow glow across the snow and the landscape, depending on if it's winter, spring, or summer. If you're taking pictures indoors, you need to also be aware of where your lighting is and if anything is casting shadows again, because when taking pictures and having shadows casted across your things, those are going to be really hard to edit out. Not impossible, but very, very hard. I've had to edit a few pictures where I've had to change the entire picture setting completely and put an entirely different filter so that it made it look like it was part of the filter, which isn't too complicated, but it gets to be a big pain in the butt, especially when you have to go through and do that on several different photos. Okay, so the difference between a film camera and a digital camera is a digital camera uses battery. It also uses the flash, and it has different settings. With a film camera, it's got the same scenery settings, but instead of using normal batteries, it uses these tiny batteries. And it also uses a film instead of pictures. So these I have to send to a place in Wisconsin, I think, to get them developed. I can't just take these out and plug them into a computer like I can with my digital camera, because it doesn't have a SIM card. Well, that's really cool. It doesn't have SIM card like this one does. With this one, I can plug in my cord and plug it into the computer, or I can take my SIM card out and plug my SIM card into a different computer. There's a lot of differences, but they still do the same thing, except for with a film camera, obviously you cannot see your pictures after you have taken them, which gets to be a lot frustrating. They pretty much disconnect their lenses the same way. There's usually a button on the side and they come off. And they have little indicators on the outsides to explain to you how and where to plug in your thing to get it to set on your camera correctly. But this one is just a small little button. Ugh, this one's complicated. This one's a really old camera. And then they've got several different lenses. I've got 2 for this one, 2 for this one. So it's confusing when you've only been working with, say, a digital camera. Because my whole life I've worked with a digital camera. I've got another one at home that is being fixed right now. I have just recently gotten this one, but it's around the same concept as a digital camera, just obviously has its different quirks from a digital camera. In my experience, Canon and Nikon are my best brands of camera. Probably because those are the only 2 I've worked with the most. But other brands you have are like Kodak, Olympus, Samsung, Sony, and Sigma. I guess it just really depends on what your preference is for cameras. Because I personally like Canon digitals. My Nikon digital is okay, but it tends to not work for the same scenery that this camera does. My purple one at home is good for like taking pictures of the moon, because I can zoom in all the way to the moon and see the craters in the moon and stuff, but then when I try and take pictures during the day, they tend to come out grainy and blurry.